Welcome everyone to this exciting journey into the world of American coin collecting. Today, we are taking a closer look at some fascinating Roosevelt dimes, featuring the historic portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the beautiful torch, olive branch and oak branch design. Each coin carries its own story, history, mint mark, condition, and unique character. As we explore these coins, we will pay special attention to important details such as the Liberty, In God We Trust, United States of America, PLURIBUS UNUM, and one dime inscriptions, as well as the different mint marks that help identify where the coins were produced. We will also look at their condition, design, composition, rarity, and the features that can make certain examples more interesting to collectors. Some Roosevelt dimes may be common in circulated condition, while others can become much more desirable when they are found in excellent condition, with strong details, beautiful original surfaces, or special characteristics such as sharp full bands on the reverse. That is what makes coin collecting so exciting. Sometimes an ordinary-looking coin can become a fascinating discovery when you take the time to examine it carefully. So get ready to explore these beautiful pieces of American history with us. Whether you are an experienced collector or just beginning your journey, every coin has something interesting to teach us. Welcome to the world of Roosevelt dimes, where history, artistry, and the thrill of discovery come together. The 1974 D. Roosevelt dime is a United States 10-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark located on the obverse, near the bottom of the portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This coin belongs to the Roosevelt Dime series, which began in 1946 following the death of President Roosevelt. The denomination is 1 dime, meaning 1/10 of a United States dollar. The coin carries the important American inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, United States of America, PLURIBUS UNUM, and 1 dime. The 1974 D issue was produced for regular circulation rather than being made from precious metal silver. Since the United States Mint had already changed the composition of the dime in the mid-1960s, this coin is made from a copper-nickel clad material, rather than the 90% silver used on earlier Roosevelt dimes. The obverse, or front side, features a portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. Roosevelt's portrait faces left, and the inscriptions are arranged around his image. The word Liberty appears to the left of the portrait, while In God We Trust is positioned toward the lower left area. The date is placed on the right side of Roosevelt's portrait, and the D mint mark appears near the lower portion of the design. The design was created by John R. Sinek, who also designed the original Roosevelt dime. Roosevelt was honored on the dime partly because of his connection with the March of Dimes campaign, which helped raise money for polio research. This historical connection makes the Roosevelt dime more than simply a 10-cent coin. It also represents an important period in American history and the country's effort to combat a serious disease. The reverse, or tails side, presents the classic Roosevelt dime design created by John R. Sinek. At the center is a torch, accompanied by an olive branch and an oak branch. The torch represents liberty, the olive branch represents peace, and the oak branch symbolizes strength. Around the design are the inscriptions United States of America, PLURIBUS UNUM, and 1 dime. The Latin phrase E pluribus unum means, out of many, one, a traditional motto associated with the United States. The reverse design gives the coin a very recognizable appearance and is one of the reasons collectors pay close attention to the condition and sharpness of the torch and its surrounding details. The 1974 D. Roosevelt dime had a reported mintage of 571,083,000 pieces, all struck at the Denver Mint. This is a substantial production number, meaning the coin is not generally considered a rare date simply because of its mintage. However, Mintage alone does not determine whether an individual example is collectible or valuable. Coins that survived in exceptional uncirculated condition, especially pieces with strong strikes, attractive surfaces, and excellent preservation, can be considerably more desirable than ordinary circulated examples. The 1974 D issue is therefore an interesting coin for collectors who enjoy searching through older U.S. circulation coins for high-grade specimens and special characteristics. One of the most important physical characteristics of this dime is its copper-nickel clad composition. The coin consists of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel, with a copper core. The total weight is approximately 2.27 grams, and its diameter is about 17.9 millimeters. The edge is reeded, with many small vertical grooves around the circumference. The United States Mint confirms that modern circulating dimes use copper-nickel clad material, reflecting the composition change made in 1965 when silver was removed from regular circulating dimes. Therefore, a 1974 D Roosevelt dime should not be treated as a 90% silver Roosevelt dime simply because it is an older-looking coin. The D mint mark is especially important when identifying this coin. During this period, the D indicates production at the Denver Mint. A 1974 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark represents the Philadelphia issue, while the D-marked version identifies the Denver production. For the 1974 issues, Philadelphia produced 470,248,000 circulation dimes without a mint mark, while Denver produced 571,083,000 pieces carrying the D mint mark. There was also a San Francisco proof issue with a much smaller production figure, but that is a different collectible category. This makes checking the mint mark one of the first things a collector should do when examining a Roosevelt dime from this period. Condition is extremely important when determining the collector appeal of a 1974 D Roosevelt dime. A heavily circulated example may show wear on Roosevelt's hair, cheek, jaw, lettering, date, and the reverse torch design. Scratches, dents, discoloration, environmental damage, and cleaning can also reduce collector desirability. On the other hand, an uncirculated example can retain much more of its original detail and surface quality. Collectors often examine the fields, Roosevelt's portrait, the date, the mint mark, and especially the reverse torch when judging the quality of the coin. A coin that has never circulated and still displays attractive original surfaces can be much more interesting than an ordinary worn specimen. Another important collecting characteristic is full bands, often abbreviated FB. On the reverse of a Roosevelt dime, collectors look closely at the horizontal bands crossing the torch. When these bands are sharply struck and completely separated across the relevant areas, the coin can qualify for a full bands designation from professional grading services. High-grade 1974 D examples with full bands can command significantly more attention than ordinary examples. PCGS records a 1974 D Roosevelt dime with a full bands designation and lists an auction record of $1,020 for an MS-67 FB example, demonstrating how a normally common circulation issue can become much more valuable when combined with exceptional grade and strike quality. This does not mean every 1974 D dime is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The premium applies to unusually high-quality certified specimens. For ordinary examples, the value is generally much closer to face value, particularly when the coin has circulated and shows normal wear. Current catalog and price references show relatively modest values for many circulated 1974 D examples, while higher-grade uncirculated coins can bring more. One reference currently lists an estimated value of around $2.79 or more for an uncirculated MS Plus example, while PCGS records a much higher auction result for an exceptional MS-67 full-band specimen. These differences illustrate why collectors should never assume that every old dime is automatically rare or extremely valuable. Grade, strike, surface quality, certification, and special characteristics all have a major effect on market value. If you are examining a 1974 D Roosevelt dime at home, start by checking the date and mint mark under good lighting. Next, examine the portrait of Roosevelt for signs of wear, scratches, or unusual doubling. Then turn the coin over and carefully inspect the torch, especially the horizontal bands. Look for strong separation, sharp details, and an attractive original surface. Avoid cleaning the coin, because polishing or chemical cleaning can damage the original surface and may reduce its desirability to collectors. A magnifying glass can help reveal small details, but the coin should always be handled carefully by its edges, rather than repeatedly touching the main surfaces. The 1974 D Roosevelt dime is also historically interesting because it belongs to the period when the United States was using copper-nickel-clad coinage for everyday circulation. Earlier Roosevelt dimes from 1946 through 1964 were made of 90% silver, but beginning in 1965, the regular circulating dime changed to the copper-nickel-clad composition. Therefore, the 1974 D issue is a representative example of America's post-silver circulating coinage. Its design remained familiar while its metallic composition reflected the changing economic and practical requirements of U.S. coin production. Overall, the 1974 D Roosevelt dime is a fascinating piece for both beginning and experienced collectors. It is a genuine United States mint coin from the Denver Mint, carries the distinctive D mint mark, features Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, and displays the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. Its large production total means it is not normally considered a rare date, but exceptional examples can still be highly collectible. The most important factors to watch are condition, original surfaces, strike quality, and full bands characteristics. A circulated example may primarily be a collectible historical coin, while a superb uncirculated example with strong full bands can attract much greater collector interest. For collectors searching through old coin collections, jars, rolls, inherited collections, or pocket change, the 1974 D Roosevelt dime is worth examining carefully. Although most examples will not be rare treasures, finding one with unusually sharp details, beautiful original luster, minimal marks, and strong full bands can make the discovery much more exciting. The coin is a good reminder that value in numismatics is not determined by age alone. A coin's rarity, condition, strike, varieties, demand, and certification can all influence its desirability. The 1974 D Roosevelt dime therefore remains an enjoyable and historically significant coin to study, collect, and compare with other Roosevelt dimes from the same era. The next up top two, the 1996 D Roosevelt dime, is a United States 10-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark on the obverse. It belongs to the long-running Roosevelt dime series, which began in 1946 and continues today. The coin has a face value of 10 cents, or 1/10 of a U.S. dollar, and features the familiar portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the front. The inscriptions include Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1996, with the Denver D mint mark positioned above the date area. The reverse carries the traditional Roosevelt dime design of a torch surrounded by an olive branch and an oak branch, along with United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and one dime. The design was created by Chief Engraver John R. Sinek. The 1996 D dime was produced in very large numbers. According to PCGS and Graysheet records, the Denver Mint struck approximately 1,400,300,000 examples of the regular 1996 D Roosevelt dime. Because of this enormous mintage, the ordinary circulated 1996 D dime is generally not considered a rare coin. Many examples can still be found in collections and older accumulations. However, the large mintage does not mean every surviving example is unimportant. Collectors become particularly interested in pieces that have remained in exceptional condition, have attractive original mint luster, show very few contact marks, or possess the desirable full bands characteristic on the reverse. The obverse of the 1996 D. Roosevelt dime displays Franklin D. Roosevelt's left-facing portrait. The word Liberty appears along the left side of the portrait, while In God We Trust is placed toward the lower left portion of the design. The date 1996 is located to the right of Roosevelt's portrait, and the D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. This mint mark is important when identifying the exact issue because Philadelphia examples from the same year carry a P mint mark, while the 1996 W issue from West Point is a much scarcer collector issue. Therefore, checking the small mint mark carefully is one of the first steps when examining a 1996 Roosevelt dime. The reverse design is one of the most recognizable parts of the Roosevelt dime series. At the center is a torch representing liberty. On either side of the torch are branches with important symbolic meanings. The olive branch represents peace, while the oak branch represents strength. Around these elements are the inscriptions United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and one dime. The Latin phrase e pluribus unum is traditionally translated as out of many, one. This reverse design has remained essentially the same since the Roosevelt dime was introduced, making the 1996 D coin easy to identify as part of the classic Roosevelt dime series. The 1996 D Roosevelt dime is made from copper-nickel-clad material, not the 90% silver composition used for Roosevelt dimes, dated 1946 through 1964. PCGS lists the composition as 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center. The coin has a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters and a weight of approximately 2.27 grams. Its edge is reeded, meaning it contains numerous small grooves around the circumference. These specifications are useful when authenticating or comparing a coin with other Roosevelt dimes. The copper-nickel-clad composition also means that an ordinary 1996 D dime should not be valued for silver content. One of the most interesting characteristics to look for on a 1996 D Roosevelt dime is the full bands, commonly abbreviated FB, designation. The full bands designation relates to the horizontal bands crossing the torch on the reverse. A strong strike can produce complete separation and definition in these bands. Many ordinary Roosevelt dimes do not have fully separated bands because of striking limitations, die condition, or other production factors. PCGS specifically notes that the 1996 D Roosevelt dime is common through approximately MS67 without full bands, but examples with full bands are scarce in all grades. This makes a high-quality 1996 D dime with exceptionally sharp torch bands much more interesting to collectors than an ordinary circulated example. The full band's characteristic can make a dramatic difference in the potential collector value of this otherwise common date. Graysheet currently lists the 1996 D MS full bands issue in a substantially higher value range than the regular uncirculated issue, depending on grade. PCGS records an auction result of $750 for a 1996 D Roosevelt dime graded MS68 FB, sold in April 2022. This is an excellent example of how condition and strike quality can transform a common date coin into a significant numismatic collectible. It does not mean that every 1996 D dime is worth hundreds of dollars. The exceptional price applies to a professionally graded, extremely high-quality full-band specimen. For an ordinary circulated 1996 D dime, the value is usually close to its 10-cent face value, because the coin was produced in enormous quantities and circulated widely. Uncirculated examples can be worth more depending on their grade and appearance. Current market references show that regular 1996D examples can reach substantially higher prices in very high mint state grades, while full bands examples can bring much stronger premiums. PCGS also records an auction result of $216 for an MS64 regular strike example, showing that certified examples can sometimes trade above face value depending on the market and specific characteristics. Values change over time, so an exact price should always be based on the coin's actual grade, appearance, certification, and recent comparable sales. When examining a 1996D dime, collectors should pay close attention to the condition of the surfaces. A circulated coin may have scratches, small dents, flattened details, discoloration, or wear on Roosevelt's portrait. An uncirculated coin should retain its original mint luster and should not show the normal friction associated with circulation. Contact marks are especially important because modern clad coins were produced in huge quantities and often came into contact with other coins during manufacturing, transportation, and storage. For a high-grade example, collectors look for clean fields, sharp lettering, strong details, attractive luster, and minimal distracting marks. The reverse torch deserves special attention because of the potential full band's premium. Under good lighting and magnification, look carefully at the two horizontal bands crossing the torch. If the central separation lines are complete and sharply defined, the coin may deserve closer examination. A coin that merely looks shiny or new is not automatically a full band's coin. The bands must have the appropriate sharpness and separation, and professional grading services use specific standards when assigning the designation. Therefore, if an apparently exceptional 1996D dime is found, careful comparison with certified examples can be useful before assuming that it has a valuable full band's characteristic. The 1996D issue should also be distinguished from the 1996W Roosevelt dime. The 1996W was produced at West Point and was included only in 1996 uncirculated sets, making it much scarcer than the regular Philadelphia and Denver circulation issues. The 1996D, by contrast, was produced in a quantity of more than 1.4 billion coins for circulation. Therefore, if someone finds a 1996 Roosevelt dime, the mint mark is extremely important. A D indicates Denver, a P indicates Philadelphia, and a W indicates West Point. The W issue has a very different rarity profile from the common D issue. Another important point is that the 1996D Roosevelt dime is not a silver dime. Roosevelt dimes dated 1964 and earlier contained silver, but the 1996D is a copper-nickel-clad coin. Collectors should therefore avoid assuming that its age gives it silver value. Its potential numismatic value comes primarily from condition, grade, strike quality, full band's designation, varieties, errors, and collector demand rather than precious metal content. This distinction is particularly important when comparing a 1996D dime with older Roosevelt dimes from the 1940s, 1950s, or early 1960s. The historical importance of the Roosevelt dime comes from its connection to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt served as the 32nd President of the United States and was closely associated with the fight against polio. The March of Dimes campaign helped raise money for polio research and treatment, and the decision to place Roosevelt's portrait on the dime connected the coin to that important chapter of American history. The 1996D dime therefore carries forward a design that had already been in use for half a century by the time this particular coin was struck. Its familiar appearance makes it an excellent example of continuity in American coinage. For collectors searching through rolls, jars, inherited collections, or old accumulations, the 1996D Roosevelt dime can be an enjoyable coin to examine. Most examples will be common, but the search becomes more interesting when looking for coins with exceptional preservation and strong torch details. A coin with brilliant original luster, very few marks, and sharply defined full bands can stand apart from the millions of ordinary pieces. The important lesson is that mintage alone does not determine value. A coin can have a very large mintage and still become desirable in an unusually high grade or with a scarce strike characteristic. Overall, the 1996 D Roosevelt dime is a fascinating modern U.S. coin with a large production history, classic Roosevelt design, copper-nickel clad composition, and an important Denver mint mark. Its regular circulated examples are generally common and close to face value, but exceptional mint state examples can be worth considerably more. The most exciting feature to investigate is the full bands designation, because high-grade 1996 D examples with sharply separated torch bands are considerably scarcer than ordinary pieces. PCGS has recorded a $750 auction result for an MS68 FB example, demonstrating the potential premium for an outstanding specimen. If you have a 1996 D Roosevelt dime, examine it carefully rather than judging it only by its date. Check the D mint mark, inspect the overall condition, look for original mint luster, examine the portrait and fields for marks, and turn the coin over to study the torch bands. If the coin appears exceptionally sharp and well preserved, it may be worth having it examined against professional grading standards. Most 1996 D dimes are ordinary circulation coins, but a truly exceptional full band specimen can be a much more desirable addition to a Roosevelt dime collection. That combination of a common mintage and potentially scarce, high-grade strike characteristics is what makes the 1996 D Roosevelt dime an interesting coin for collectors to search for and study. The next up, top 3, the 1990 D Roosevelt dime is a United States 10-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint and identified by the D mint mark on the obverse. It belongs to the famous Roosevelt Dimes series, which began in 1946 after the death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The coin has a face value of 10 cents, or 1/10 of a U.S. dollar. Its obverse features the left-facing portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, together with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1990, while the Denver mint mark appears near the date. The reverse displays the traditional torch, olive branch, and oak branch design, along with United States of America, PLURIBUS UNUM, and one dime. The overall design is one of the most recognizable designs in modern American coinage. The Roosevelt dime was designed by John R. Sinek, who was chief engraver of the United States Mint when the coin was introduced. Sinek's design placed Roosevelt's portrait on the obverse and created a reverse featuring a torch between an olive branch and an oak branch. These symbols have important meanings. The torch represents liberty, the olive branch represents peace, and the oak branch represents strength. The phrase PLURIBUS UNUM, meaning out of many, one, appears on the reverse. Because this design continued for decades, the 1990 D dime is part of a long and important tradition of American circulating coinage. The D mint mark is one of the easiest ways to identify this particular issue. The letter D indicates that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. Collectors should look carefully near the lower right portion of Roosevelt's portrait and around the date area to locate the mint mark. A 1990 Roosevelt dime with a D is the Denver issue, while a coin without a mint mark from the same period represents a different production facility. The mint mark is small, so examining the coin under good lighting or magnification can make identification easier. For collectors building a Roosevelt dime collection by date and mint, the D mint mark is an essential part of the coin's identity. The 1990 D Roosevelt dime was produced in a very large quantity, so the normal circulated example is not considered a rare date. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of these dimes for everyday commerce. Because so many were produced, examples can still be found in old collections, coin jars, rolls, and accumulations of American change. A large mintage, however, does not mean that every surviving coin is identical in collector interest. Coins preserved in exceptional mint state condition, with attractive original luster, sharp details, and very few marks, can be considerably more desirable than worn examples. The 1990 D-dime is made from copper-nickel clad material, rather than the 90% silver composition used on Roosevelt dimes dated 1964 and earlier. Modern clad dimes consist of a copper core surrounded by an outer layer containing copper and nickel. The coin has a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters, weighs about 2.27 grams, and has a reeded edge. These physical characteristics are useful for identifying an authentic example. Because the 1990 D-dime is not a silver coin, its value is generally based on numismatic characteristics rather than silver content. When examining the obverse, collectors should look at the condition of Roosevelt's portrait, the lettering, the date, and the surrounding fields. A circulated coin will normally show wear on the highest points of Roosevelt's hair, cheek, jaw, and other raised details. Scratches, small contact marks, discoloration, and surface damage can also be present. An uncirculated coin should show little or no evidence of circulation and may retain its original mint luster. The quality of the surfaces is especially important for collectors interested in high-grade Roosevelt dimes, because even small marks can affect the final grade. The reverse deserves equally careful attention. The central torch should be examined for clarity and strength of detail, while the olive and oak branches should show clean and well-defined features. Collectors also examine the lettering for sharpness and the fields for scratches or contact marks. On Roosevelt dimes, the bands across the torch are particularly important. Some sharply struck coins display strong separation between the bands, while others may have weaker details because of the striking process. This is one reason why two coins with the same date and mint mark can have very different collector values. One of the most important features collectors may search for on a Roosevelt dime is full bands, often abbreviated FB by grading services. Full bands refers to the horizontal bands crossing the torch on the reverse. When these bands are sharply struck and show complete separation, the coin can receive a full bands designation when professionally graded. A high-grade 1990 D-dime with exceptionally sharp full bands can be much more desirable than an ordinary example. However, not every shiny or uncirculated 1990 D-dime qualifies for full bands. The strike must meet the grading service's specific requirements, so collectors should examine the torch carefully before assuming that a coin has this characteristic. Another important consideration is cleaning. Some people may try to make an old dime look brighter by polishing it or using chemicals. This is generally harmful from a numismatic perspective. Cleaning can leave scratches, unnatural shine, hairlines, or chemical discoloration on the surface. Professional collectors generally prefer coins with their original surfaces and natural appearance. Therefore, if you discover a 1990 D-dime that looks unusually attractive, it is best to leave it in its original condition rather than attempting to make it brighter or shinier. The value of a 1990 D Roosevelt dime depends heavily on condition. A normal circulated example is generally worth around its face value because of the enormous number produced. An attractive uncirculated example can have additional collector value, particularly in higher mint state grades. Exceptionally high-grade coins with strong strikes and desirable full bands characteristics can be worth substantially more than ordinary examples. This is why it is important not to judge a coin's value solely from its date or mint mark. Grade, surface quality, strike, rarity, and collector demand all play major roles. The historical background of the Roosevelt dime also adds interest to the coin. Franklin D. Roosevelt served as the 32nd President of the United States and became closely associated with the fight against polio. The March of Dimes campaign played a major role in raising funds for polio research. Roosevelt's image was placed on the dime in 1946, shortly after his death, making the denomination closely connected with that important chapter in American history. By 1990, the Roosevelt dime design had already been used for more than 4 decades, making the 1990 D an excellent representative of the continuation of this historic American coin series. For people who enjoy searching through old coins, the 1990 D Roosevelt dime can be an interesting piece to inspect. Although most examples are common, searching through many coins can occasionally reveal an unusually well-preserved specimen. Collectors should check for strong details, original luster, minimal contact marks, attractive surfaces, and especially sharp torch bands. It is also worth comparing a promising coin with professionally graded examples to understand what high-grade specimens look like. A magnifying glass and good natural or neutral lighting can be useful when examining small details. It is also important to remember that old does not automatically mean rare. The 1990 D dime is more than 3 decades old, but its large production quantity means that age alone does not make it valuable. The real collecting interest comes from the combination of date, mint mark, condition, strike quality, varieties, errors, and demand. An ordinary worn coin may have little premium over face value, while a superbly preserved example can attract collectors searching for high-grade pieces. This principle applies to many modern United States coins. Overall, the 1990 D Roosevelt dime is a historically interesting and widely collected American coin. It carries Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait on the obverse, the Denver D mint mark, and the classic torch, olive branch, and oak branch design on the reverse. Its copper-nickel-clad composition reflects the post-silver era of American coinage. Although the regular 1990 D dime is generally common, collectors may still find special interest in high-grade examples, attractive uncirculated coins, strong strikes, and specimens with full bands characteristics. If you have a 1990 D Roosevelt dime, examine it carefully before dismissing it as an ordinary 10-cent coin. Check the date and mint mark, inspect Roosevelt's portrait and the fields for wear and marks, and then turn the coin over to study the torch and its horizontal bands. Look for original luster and strong, complete details. Most circulated examples will not be rare treasures, but an exceptionally preserved specimen can be a worthwhile addition to a Roosevelt dime collection. The 1990 D dime is therefore a great example of how condition, strike quality, and careful examination can make an otherwise common U.S. coin much more interesting to collect.